So on the other side of our break, we now turn to the other side of the ball, the USC offense against the Michigan defense. On defense, that's where Michigan plants its flag. Michigan has been so good on the defensive line, in particular, over the past several years. And, you go back to Aiden Hutchinson, and you continue with just all the beasts that Michigan has turned out as pass rushers, edge rushers, and interior defensive linemen. That is really the cornerstone of the Michigan program. So the biggest challenge yet for this USC offensive line, a line that, no Elijah Page and no Killian O'Connor for most of the way against Illinois, and yet, did a really good job. But, I think we could all agree here at the USC channel, and, Michigan fans are already on board. We don't need to convince them. They know this. Michigan's a step up in weight class from Illinois in terms of a defensive line. So what's the outlook for the USC offensive line, giving Jaden Maiava enough time, enabling the running game to function well? And keeping in mind, a year ago, that was the matchup which cost USC. The offensive line could not move Michigan's defensive line, couldn't get a first down late in the game, was overpowered. Obviously, you have a much more experienced USC group 1 year later, and there are very encouraging signs that Zach Hansen is getting more out of this group in ways that Josh Henson did not. But Michigan certainly sets the bar high in terms of a defensive line challenge. So Crash first, Ethan second, your outlook for the USC offensive line in this game on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you? That could be one way you get at it. But just, how are you feeling? What's your vibe for the USC offensive line going against Michigan's quality defensive front?
So I think it's the same thing like I was saying when we were talking about the defense, Matt, that this game is also applies to when USC's on offense. What happens in the trenches is really going to be very defining. So I think absolutely this game is really going to be. I think I'm kind of not sure what to expect, especially with Killian O'Connor out. I think with Elijah Page potentially being back, that's definitely a good sign, but we'll have to wait and see. That being said, though, I think really I'm a little worried about, can they, keep the penalties down? And especially, can DeAndre Reed just know that, especially now that he knows that he's going to be, the starter for foreseeably, I think the next 2-3 games, it seems like, based on the reports coming out about O'Connor's injury, that I think he's going to need to really have to focus in and really just make sure he doesn't have any bad penalties or mistakes. Because that, I think, was one thing that certainly hurt. I think definitely having Page back will be stronger. So I have confidence in this O-line, but I am certainly a little worried about how DeAndre Reed fits in, just because of how sloppily he started, how sloppily he was when he came in. I think he especially with that, wiped out that trick play that was, would have ended up on everyone's phones for probably still, if, it hadn't been wiped out. We'd probably still be seeing something in our feeds still on Instagram and stuff. But so I got confident this is the O-line, but I'm just I'm just wondering, can Reed be at his best? And I think that's really going to be crucial, especially with, as the center, you got to, relay information both ways that you're getting as the plays are being called and as they're developing. So if USC can just be solid and just win the battles in the trenches, I think this O-line can be great. Otherwise, I think it'd be potentially a brutal day for Jaden Maiava and the running backs.
So I'm still pretty confident in the offensive line. I put my confidence at a 7. I think that DeAndre Reed's going to rebound from the mistakes that he made last game, talking about that drifting down the field on the big play, as Crash mentioned, and then also the high snap. So I think he's going to play better, especially with kind of 2 weeks to prepare. He's an experienced vet. I kind of trust him. I don't feel like obviously it was a close battle between him and Killian O'Connor throughout camp. It was probably the closest major position battle on this team. So that says a lot about him, given how well Killian O'Connor has played. So I think DeAndre Reed's going to have a good football game. And then, Elijah Page obviously has been practicing both of the last 2 weeks. So there's a lot of hope that he's going to be back. And even if he isn't, there's a lot of depth on this defense on this offensive line. And they've shown that throughout the season so far. I think, the kind of key that I'm looking at for Michigan's defense versus USC's offense is Michigan's defense is kind of a big play defense. They rack up a lot of sacks. They will get you to turn the ball over. They'll make big pass breakups in the secondary. So I think the key is, if Jaden Mayava has another moment in this game like he did against Illinois, where he threw an interception and then had another bad drive after that, like just not letting it spiral. And I think it's the same thing for the running backs and the same thing with the wide receivers. Like if anybody makes a mistake, same thing with the offensive line, like any position on this offense, if they make a mistake, they need to not get in their heads about it. They need to kind of remember who they are and, allow the confidence that they had in the first 4 games to carry over. So I think confidence is the name of the game here. USC has the number 1 passing quarterback in the Big Ten, the number 1 receiver in the Big Ten, and the number 2 running back. Like the only running back that's close to Justice Haynes' rushing number in the Big Ten is Wayman Jordan. So, and they obviously have Eli Sanders in that backfield to boot, and the offensive line has been playing great. So I think they need to, kind of remember who they are and, culture, identity, all that needs to get into their head. Like, yes, Michigan is a good defense. Yes, they're going to make big plays, but USC can push forward and still have, like, generally over the 60 minutes, a successful offensive game. And I think, Lincoln Riley's play calling has been really good so far this season as well. I kind of trust him to, at least in the first 3.75 quarters, to call a good football game. So I trust him to do that there. And, I think I also trust them to make offensive adjustments because they've seemed to do that decently well as well. So, there's some aspects to this offense that we may haven't seen yet. I think we could see more Hassan Longstreet in this game. I think we could see Jaden Mayava using his legs more. Also, Mayava's been he hasn't needed to be that elusive, but he's been somewhat elusive when, pass rushers have gotten the backfield. I think he's only been sacked like twice all year. So, yeah, I think it's all about confidence and all about when Michigan makes a big play, because they will. I think that they'll make a handful of big plays, even if it's a bad game for the Michigan defense. I think that they'll wreak havoc on a handful of plays. It's about rebounding, picking yourself up, being confident, remembering the body of work that you've done over the first 5 weeks of the season, and going out and being the superstars that you are, I think.
All right, now let's turn to play calling. And I'll certainly let Crash weigh in on this, but like Ethan, since we started our show, you and I, earlier this year, play calling has really been an element of competition where you and I have drilled deep. So for this Michigan game, and you kind of dropped some breadcrumbs in your answer, is this a game where you want to just land an early jab? And by that, I mean throw downfield, or just go straight north-south with the run game. You try and just, go at Michigan straightforward, with a, Roki Sasaki 101 on the outside corner. Or do you want to throw a changeup, a Blake Snell changeup, 87, sinking out of the strike zone, and, you use Mayava as a runner. You have him keep the ball on the first drive of the game, and you use some screens, and you try and do things that try and get Michigan off the scent, maybe hope that Michigan backs off, retreats a little bit, and is on its heels. So do you just go with the straight north-south jabs, or do you want to go with some sleight of hand, some finesse, some misdirection? How do you think Lincoln Riley structures the first few possessions for USC? Do you have a strong lean toward one or the other? Ethan first, Crash second.
I think starting fast in this game is important. I wouldn't say I necessarily have a strong lean, but if I had to, because I think that, USC has so many different ways that they can attack a defense on offense. But I think if I had to pick, I would say, try to go north-south and try to land those jabs early, just because I think, based on the Wisconsin game, based on how I know Michigan plays football, I think it's bad news for USC if they're struggling to score early in the game, even if their defense is playing well and this game, is low scoring and close late. I think that that's a bad, very scenario that would make me very nervous. I think you want to land a punch, you want to send a message, because I think Michigan starts kind of slow. And I think that it's when the game is close in the end and, they have limited your offense that they're able to pull games out. So I think, it's in USC's best interest to, like I said, and it builds confidence too. Like if they get a long touchdown early, just goes out and proves that you can score on this Michigan defense, and you can overcome the kind of the talent they have on that side of the ball. So I want to see them attack, and I think everyone in the USC fan base would take that outcome, obviously. But like I said, not a super strongly, and I trust, Lincoln Riley's judgment on this one.
I think you need to start out aggressive. Just start with the fastball. I think both just the explosive throws and also just run it just straight north south, especially just because running is just being able to run the ball well in the Big Ten is key to winning games. Is what I've heard, especially as that's what I've learned is just, from covering Big Ten football to just observing in the past, just how those can you just run the ball and can you start out strong? So I think I'm not opposed to USC changing up, especially in the middle, but I think USC just needs to start strong and send a message that they're here, that this is their time, and that Michigan's in for a long game. So I'd like to see USC just start out strong when they get the ball.
Yeah, one of the things when I was doing the Michigan show just an hour before coming on here to the USC show, Michigan fans are really, they place a lot of faith in Rod Moore in the secondary, and that when he's on the field, everything comes together. The pieces fit for this Michigan secondary. So to me, it seems as though Lincoln Riley, in terms of an attack plan, he needs to just go to the half of the field where Rod Moore isn't. And maybe Rod Moore gets the Mackay, or is keen on Mackay Lemon, or at least like he's thinking about Mackay Lemon. But if you need to go to Jacoby Lane, or you need to go to Lake McCree or Walker Lyons, going to the half of the field where Rod Moore isn't able to cover ground in that Michigan secondary, I think that could be a line of attack that could be very useful for USC. And it's kind of funny, before the season, USC fans were all run the damn ball, Lincoln, run the damn ball, and he's actually been pretty decent about that overall. But I think this is another game where you need to pass first to set up the run, and also you need to pass first just to score. And this is a crucial thing. USC was driving, first drive of the game, Wayman Jordan fumbles inside the Illinois 30. Just imagine for a second how different that USC-Illinois game would have been if the Trojans could have gone up 7-0. They throw that first punch. And this is life with Lincoln Riley. The margins are small. If you commit a crucial turnover, you can just send the game spiraling in the wrong direction. If you don't get the early lead, you're not dictating the way the game is played. But if USC can get that first touchdown, then the game, Michigan has to think a little bit more. Certainly as we get into the third quarter, if USC's leading by 7 to 10 points in the third quarter, the ability for Michigan to stick with the running game with Justice Haynes, it just becomes a little bit a tighter box. It becomes a more difficult challenge for Michigan to emphasize the ground game. And if so, USC getting a lead, it just sets up the game style and the parameters of competition so much better for the Trojans. So that is part of this notion of throwing the first punch. If USC gets up 7 and especially 10, and I'm not predicting that, I'm just saying if, it really just sets up the game the way USC wants it to be. All right, so now we talked about offensive line, we've talked about play calling. Now let's go to Jaden Mayava. He has been very good. I wouldn't say great because he had that third quarter against Illinois when he just was missing throws that he ordinarily would make. And we repeat the theme that Michigan is a step up in weight class from Illinois. So it's the best team that USC has faced this season, or if not team, this is the best defense that USC will have faced to this point in the season. So this is a marker for Jaden Mayava. This is a time for him to show just how much he really has evolved. And this is not to take away from what he did in the first month of the season, but just the competition was not elite. We can all be adults here and admit that. So now he comes up against a gold standard defense. Ethan first, Crash second. How confident are you in Jaden Mayava going up against Michigan? Prime time, Coliseum, MVC, all the bright lights focused finally upon him. And with 2 weeks to prepare, it could be something that puts him in the best possible situation, but it's 2 weeks to think about this game. And maybe this thing gets in his head and he gets rattled. Lots of scenarios in play, but where are you with Jaden Mayava going into Michigan? Ethan first, Crash second.
I think I am still confident in him. I'd put my confidence in him also at like a 7. I think my confidence in him, though, actually stems more from my confidence in Lincoln Riley, because I think, you know, his growth as a player has a lot to do with him, but it also has a lot to do with Lincoln Riley. We know about the way that Lincoln Riley develops quarterbacks. And I think, you know, there's a significant moment in the Illinois game. He obviously had that one bad drive. USC, you know, kind of goes 3 and out as people would not have liked, and that ended up playing a crucial role in them losing the game. And, you know, I pointed out his body language in that moment, thought it wasn't great, went out and, you know, kind of played nervous. And I was like, and it kind of even more, I was like, with that body language, that's kind of, you know, that's kind of worrying me. But ultimately Lincoln Riley had a conversation with him after that drive happened on the sideline, and he rebounded after that. And so I think that that's a real sign that Lincoln Riley kind of has, you know, all of the keys to unlock the best version of Jade Mayava. And, you know, that has to do with his offseason development and his improvement as a player, but it also, I think, has to do with his in-game confidence, because, you know, it's been a complete transformation from last year, his confidence. And I think also Lincoln was able to kind of help his confidence rebound in the game against Illinois. So I think, you know, I am confident in Lincoln mixing up the play calling if things aren't working. I'm confident in him kind of pulling Mayava aside and telling him the right words, because they seem to have a good relationship. So, you know, and this is a defense that'll challenge Mayava. It's a defense that'll be in his face. You know, he might make a mistake, like I said, and I could see all those things happening, which is why it's not at a 10. But I think, you know, I'm still decently confident, because I think that Lincoln Riley kind of has the keys to helping him be the best version of himself in this game.
So I think Jade Mayava is around a 9, actually. And that's just because obviously he had that rough third quarter against Illinois, but for the most part, I've been impressed how he's played. Granted, it hasn't been against, you know, the best competition. Obviously, Michigan is going to be the toughest test yet so far this season, but I'm still really confident in how he just really conducts himself. He's usually really, you know, showing great leadership on the field. And obviously, like you said, Ethan, he did have that one moment where his body language wasn't great. But even still, I generally think he, for the most part, stays really even keeled when he plays. And especially, I think that was really evident, I think, last year when he wasn't as developed, when he was still just going off of raw talent, when he was making more mistakes. And I remember reading in the Vegas Bowl, pardon me, after he had like that rough start, I remember Kyle Ford just came over and said, "Don't worry, man. We're with you. We trust you. You got this." And he said that was kind of what motivated him to help lead USC on that, you know, drive to rally to win the game. So I think just that even right there just shows that he just knows how to just keep himself calm no matter what. And then I think Lincoln Riley too, like you said, Ethan, just has a way with quarterbacks. We all have to. There's no denying that. Like, he's built his name off of it. Just look at all the quarterbacks that he's coached at some point since he was at Oklahoma who are now in the NFL. I think I saw USC posted a graphic. It's like they're 5 right now, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So that just shows the way he develops quarterbacks is so big. And I think that just having Lincoln Riley in your corner as a quarterback is just so huge. So I think just a combination of Riley as well as just with how Mayava is just able to, you know, keep himself calm in big games, I think it's going to be huge. So I'm really confident he's going to have a bounce back game. And I was still impressed with him, even just obviously that third quarter wasn't great. I think there was certainly some stuff with the O-line where he looked like he was scrambling a bit for his life. But other than that, I've been really impressed in the entire year. So I'm really confident he's going to have a big game on Saturday.
One other subplot before we get to game predictions and our final thoughts. The Illinois game had the backdrop of, you know, Illinois was coming off an absolutely terrible performance against Indiana. And we discussed, like, Illinois is going to be mad. They're going to have a chip on their shoulder. They're going to be angry. They're going to come out with something to prove. Now, Michigan wasn't terrible against Wisconsin, but wasn't really that good, right? You know, this was a 17-10 game in the fourth quarter, and Wisconsin might be 18th in the Big Ten. And if you do your quick math, that means last. Wisconsin might be the worst team in the Big Ten now that UCLA has shown a pulse, right? And Northwestern beat UCLA. So, like, Wisconsin might be the worst team in the Big Ten, and Michigan let Wisconsin hang around for, you know, about 50 minutes. in that game. Now, was Michigan ever in danger of losing? No. And was the Michigan defense strong after Wisconsin's first drive touchdown? Yes. So, like, Michigan did some things solidly and well. But overall, like, it was not the most put together, convincing performance. And, you know, like, hey, I've been covering college football for almost 25 years. I know it when I see it. Michigan was looking ahead to USC. Let's just put it out there. And I think a part of, like, that Illinois-Indiana game, it was a big game, but, like, Illinois really brought its A game, or brought its best for USC. So I'll say it's a trend around here, gentlemen. Like, people look ahead to USC. People treat USC as the really big game on their schedule. And to USC's discredit, like, no one on the Trojans seemed to grasp that Illinois was going to put all of its eggs in that basket and treat the Trojans as their Super Bowl. Like, how you could not think that way blows my mind. But, that's Lincoln Riley being inadequate. But, like, now we have another setup where the USC is going to look at the game film and is not going to be impressed by what Michigan did against Wisconsin. But, like, you can't allow that to dictate your level of focus, or you can't allow that to dictate your level of confidence. Like, when you look at film, you can say, okay, there's an opportunity for us to do well, but, like, the mental energy shouldn't be, oh, we got this. You don't think that way as an athlete. It's, this is what we have to do to make it happen. This is what we have to do to take advantage of this opportunity. It's not, oh, we're going to beat these guys, and it seemed as though USC treated the Illinois game that way. So this Michigan game is a second chance for the Trojans to approach the game the right way, to look at film, to see all the mistakes Michigan's offense made against Wisconsin and say, all right, if we do our job and if we play up to our potential, we have an opportunity to do well. But no one should be overconfident. So what are you expecting from Michigan? Like, I'm expecting Michigan's best game. I'm expecting Michigan to come roaring out of that tunnel, and it's a matter of USC meeting that challenge. But, like, let's just briefly touch on what you saw from Michigan against Wisconsin, what you're expecting from Michigan in this game, and how USC tries to not be overconfident, but to be truly prepared and to approach that question the right way. So Crash first on this one, and Ethan second.
So I think just with this game, obviously, like we've been saying, like Michigan, obviously, I mean, they weren't really in danger of losing, but it definitely took them a moment to get going. I mean, you especially saw Wisconsin is able to hang around them for kind of the first half, really, before the Wolverines really kind of were able to, kind of extend it and stretch the margin of win to a comfortable amount to where they kind of could just, kind of cruise control their way through it. But at the same time, that just shows that, yeah, maybe they were looking ahead to USC, but they were able to win pretty comfortably doing it still. So that shows, even by looking ahead, that they're still really well focused for this game. And especially, it's different too, because obviously Michigan was at home. They had the benefit of fans, but now they're going on the road. And while there will definitely be a lot of fans there, they're not going to get – there's going to be more USC fans there. That's just how games work. That's just how home games are. When you're the home team, you're generally, unless you're UCLA, I guess, going to have more fans than your opponent. And the same is true when you go on the road. More of your opponent's fans are showing up. So I think just with how Michigan played, I think it was decent performance, but still not great. But that said, I think it's still definitely – I think they're going to be better this week. I think they're obviously looking towards USC. It's a big matchup. Plus, I mean, they've had Sharon Moore out, not trying to say that obviously, they didn't seem to suffer much without him, but they weren't playing marquee opponents, and he's got to, adjust to being back. But he's back now. He's been back for a week. So I think just having him back now on a full-time basis and being around his guys again is going to make everyone more comfortable now that their leader is back. So I think it's really just like, what I saw from Michigan was, I think it's not exactly the most impressive game, but I think they've definitely could be more impressive. And I think that's what's probably going to happen on Saturday.
So I do expect close to Michigan's best. I don't know if, this is a game, to be fair to Michigan and all of their history, that means as much as per se like the Ohio State game at the end of the season. But I do think that, this is a game that means a lot to any program in the Big Ten that considers themselves a big powerhouse, potentially national championship contender program. And, whether you want to admit that, whether you want to say like, we respect USC's history, we think that they can be a good football team under Lincoln Riley, and this is a big win for us, or you want to downplay it and you want to say, the USC program is done, it's over the hill, it's done with, Lincoln Riley's not a good football coach, and we're going to put USC in their place. Either way, like, this is a big game for you. This is a culture setting game for anybody. I mean, it's USC is with all the history that it has, it's just one of the big brands in college football. It's the way that it is. It's the way that it always will be. It's kind of like the Lakers in basketball. Like, the Lakers can be bad and beating the Lakers still matters. It's the same with, the Celtics. It's the same with, you want to talk about baseball, beating the Yankees, like any of those teams that have had a prominent era of success, beating them matters, and beating them at their place matters. So I think that, there's a lot of intrigue there, whether you want to take the approach of like, I'm a Michigan fan and I'm nervous about USC, or you wanted to kind of, take a little bit of the approach that they're not all that. And I think, Sharon Moore making the comments that he made also goes to show that this game matters to him, matters that he, kind of wants to set the national narrative about what the kind of program that Michigan is compared to the program that USC is. So it is a big game. And I think, Michigan is going to come out and treat it as such. There's a lot of Rose Bowl losses to avenge. There's a lot of, like I said, it's just a brand. It's a brand that carries significance, even if the team isn't as great, whatever year that it is. So, and I'm sure a lot of Michigan fans are going to show up, and the Michigan players are going to want to perform for them. I'm sure that they're going to want to, perform in front of the USC fans as well, because like I said, I do believe there will be a lot of USC fans at this game. And I think that, Michigan fans are going to want to keep them lukewarm and send them home unhappy and send them with a bad taste in their mouth, not wanting to come to the Coliseum again, so that in the future, when Michigan comes again, Michigan fans really can outnumber USC fans. So, which I think is possible, if USC is bad, but I do think that there will be an overwhelmingly large amount of USC fans compared to Michigan fans, at least for this first game, and at least with, the season very still much alive. So, lots of intrigue there for sure.
All right, and we've reached the end of the line. It's time for predictions. I'll lead off with mine. There are games I feel, and Mark Rogers asked me to make my picks, against the spread and straight up at the Voice of College Football. It gives me 12 games every week to predict. So, if I'm forced to make a prediction, of course I'm going to give it. That's just what Mark Rogers wants me to do here at the Voice of College Football. But, again, from a betting standpoint, this is just timeless betting advice, that you don't bet on hunches. You don't bet on guesswork. You have a strong angle, like you've done your homework. You know what the inside read really is on a game, and this is how it's going to go, and you have that certainty. That's when you bet, when you have that angle. I don't have an angle. I don't have any clue about this game in terms of who wins, how it's going to go. I do think Michigan was looking ahead to USC against Wisconsin, so I do think Michigan's going to play with its best effort. Maybe Michigan might not be precise, but Michigan's going to be tough, is going to be physical, and I don't know if USC is going to be able to meet the physical challenge that Michigan presents. I think if there was one thing I'm relatively confident about, but not 100%, it would be that this is a one-score game. That the winner is going to win by 8 points or fewer, because this is typically how these games have gone for USC in the Big Ten under Lincoln Riley. That the game might pinball around in a million different directions, but at the end, it's a one-score game. But whether USC wins or loses, I have no idea. Gentlemen, your predictions. Crash first, Ethan second.
This is certainly a tough one, especially pointed out a lot of good reasons. I think, this game can go in a lot of different ways based on what we've seen before. That said, though, obviously, I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be whoever wins is going to win by less than 4, and I think USC is going to find a way to pull out the win, but it's not going to look pretty. And I think it's only going to be by by a point. Like, I don't think USC is going to cover the spread, which, as I'm checking now, according to ESPN Bet, is now 2.5. So USC 2.5 point favorites. So I don't even think they're going to cover that. So I think USC is going to find a way to win. I'm confident that this team is going to come out angry and with something to prove. But I think it's going to be a game that comes down to the final play with USC having to just do whatever it takes to just finish the game with the lead when the clock hits 3-0 at the end of the fourth quarter.
So I agree with Matt. I wouldn't put any money on this game. I think that that's because this game could have so many different identities, to be honest with you. I think that this could end up being a defensive battle because I think, the Michigan defense is really good. And I think the Michigan offense could also struggle. And the USC defense could come up with some opportunistic plays to kind of keep the score low on the Michigan side of the ball. So I think that, and Michigan also being on the road, and them being a run first offense, there's a tendency to do more conservative play calling. And so I think that this could be a low scoring game, in one aspect. And I also think this could be a shootout. I think you could, have USC's offense doing whatever they want, but Michigan's offense keeping themselves in the game, with big running plays from Justice Haynes and the whole crew. So I just really don't know the direction of this game. And I think that's why I wouldn't put any money on it. I think the one thing that I'm confident in is that this is not going to be a Michigan blowout. I actually, if you asked me if I had to put money, if I had to choose between putting money on a USC blowout and a Michigan blowout, I'd put on a USC blowout over a Michigan blowout, just because I think USC, even last year, even in a year where they dropped a lot of Big Ten games that they should have won, they were a much better team in the Coliseum. And I think that is going to be the case here. I think that that's going to do wonders for their confidence, for their comfortability. Like I said, Michigan fans in the chat tonight have done a lot of talk about how many Michigan fans are going to be at the game. I think you kind of saw the max amount of fans that of Big Ten fans you were going to see at a game last year with the Nebraska and the Penn State games. I don't think there's going to be more Michigan fans than that, because I think USC fans are really excited about this game, have been excited about this game for months. It's kind of the big home game of the year. So, and I think, they're more excited about this game than UCLA, even though UCLA is kind of the rivalry game because UCLA is so bad. So, either the expected outcome happens and USC runs away with a blowout, or, by some, Penn State manner of shock, USC loses and USC fans aren't happy with that either. So there's not as much excitement there as this game is. I think this game carries a lot more significance this year. So this is the big home game. And like I said, regular fans are going to show up. Season ticket holders are going to show up. Students are showing up. Like, that is directly supported by the evidence I've seen so far. So that's going to add to their comfortability as well. Like, I'm more confident in USC being so comfortable that the offense puts up a big number while the Michigan offense struggles than Michigan running all over USC and USC laying down and dying. I don't think that's going to happen. But like I said, just not a game I'd bet money on, because I think there's so many different directions it could go.
100% agree. So, folks, we had last Sunday off because USC had the weekend off. But, of course, with a game on Saturday, we're back at you on Sunday, 5 p.m. in the West and Los Angeles, 8 p.m. in the East for our Michigan postgame show. We don't do postgames right after because all of us are super busy and involved with professional obligations on Saturdays. But we all come together Sundays at 5 p.m. in LA. For our day after postgame show. So you can join myself, Ethan, and Crashlet Collier, for our Michigan postgame show Sunday, 5 p.m. Pacific